Good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are joining us from, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to welcome to another AFRINIC webinar series. Our webinar today is titled Internet Development Initiatives in Africa. This series of webinars offer our community an opportunity to engage in a dialogue on the current and future landscape of internet accessibility and robustness in Africa. In this and subsequently webinars, we'll see subject matter experts engage on various topics that stimulate the growth and development of internet in Africa. Before we begin, kindly type in the chat section to let me know if you can hear me and where are you joining us from. My name is Dr. Jabera Matogoro. I'm the board member, Destination Imagination Africa, and a lecturer at the University of Dodoma in Tanzania. I will be your moderator in this session. And on the same on some of house rule, I'm certain that most of us are familiar with the Zoom client application. However, it won't harm if we point out the key features on the platform that will make this session a much better experience. User interface, so you can just all controls at the bottom of the screen. This may include the chat icon, raise hand icon, reactions, the poll, and the live transcription button. The QA section at the bottom of your screen can be used for any questions related to this session. Feel free to type in your question as the presentations are going on. All questions on the floor will be read out, and the panelists will respond to all the questions. All the delegates can share your comments regarding the webinar in the chat. For any other issue related to Zoom platform, like your connectivity or any other, please use the chat section and the team members will assist. This webinar is in English and the session is recorded and simultaneously transmitted live on AFRINIC YouTube page, where the recording will be archived for your reference. While there may be issue of maybe to hit follow, then this year in 2024, we are trying really hard to rev up everything we do. And the only thing we are eager going to ask is for you to hit follow on our social media platform. Thank you so much. And the final, this meeting shall abide by the AFRINIC Code of Conduct. Please be respectful as you engage with other participants on the webinar. And also the AFRINIC Code of Conduct and the event terms and conditions are all available on the AFRINIC website. Please take time to read this, and I'll also post a link to the chat in the Zoom platform. On our webinar today, we are privileged to have 4 wonderful panelists: Cedrick, Mbeyet, who is working as a Stakeholder Development Manager at AFRINIC. And I'm also privileged to have Mr. Michuki Mwangi, who is the Regional Development Manager for Internet Society. My wonderful friends, and I'm happy to connect again through this webinar. And I also have Barak Otieno, who is the Chairman of the Association of the Community Network in Kenya. So this is a bottom-up approach to connect the unconnected population. So thank you, Barak. And final, I also have Benson Mbeyet, who is the Software Development Consultant at Kichakata Kinzigito. Let me allow them the opportunity to introduce themselves, and I actually appreciate to start whichever order. So my presenter, welcome, and be free to interact with the audience. Thank you so much. Welcome to the webinar.
Okay, maybe I will start and introduce myself. Thank you very much, Dr. Javera. And good morning, everyone. My name is Cedrick Mbeyet. I work at AFRINIC as Stakeholder Development Manager, focusing on technical cooperation. And basically, my role at AFRINIC is to make sure that we have a smooth coordination when it comes to technical programs, working with our different stakeholders, which are all our members, but also the critical infrastructures, the government, academia, university, the technical community, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot to say about it, but I will tell you a little bit more when I will do my presentation. Back to you, Dr. Jabera.
Thank you so much, Cedrick, and I will take it to Michuki and welcome, Michuki.
Thank you, Dr. Matogoro. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. My name is Michuki Mwangi. I'm the Distinguished Technologist for Internet Growth at the Internet Society. For those who may not know, the Internet Society is a global charity that was established more than 30 years ago and working at the intersection of technology and policy. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the work that we've done on internet development. And I hope that in the course of the engagements, we'll get to learn about the work that we do at the Internet Society, but also more so how we can collaborate together to bring better connectivity and connect the unconnected in our region. Thank you very much.
Can go next. Benson.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jabber. My name is Benson Mbeyet. I'm a software developer based in Nairobi, Kenya. I am very interested in internet standards and have participated a little bit in the IETF, which is heavily supported by the Internet Society. And I look forward to telling you a little bit more about IETF and maybe encouraging you to participate.
Thank you so much. Such a distinguished panelist and wonderful panelist in this conversation. So maybe I can give time for Cedrick to do your presentation and then we can proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Matagoro. Just sharing my screen. Okay, perfect. So once again, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. So I will here talk a little bit about what we do at AFRINIC when it comes to Internet Development Initiative in Africa. And first of all, I want to emphasize our vision and our mission. Why? Because a lot of time people ask us, okay, you are supposedly just working on IPs, but also when you look at our vision, it gives you a little bit more clues about what we do at AFRINIC. Our vision, a secure and accessible internet for sustainable digital growth in Africa, and our mission to serve the African internet community by delivering efficient services in a global multi-stakeholder environment. So now, when it comes to the internet development initiatives that we have at AFRINIC, we have multiple, but I will focus on 5 that we have. The first one is the Technical Community Development Program. What we will do is to build technical community because we think that they are the key to advancing the development of the internet in the region. And Also, something important, yes, technology is important, but always remember that people are at the center. And we think that those technical community will play a crucial role when it comes to developing internet, ensure that the internet is not only stable, but secure, but also accessible. And accessibility here is very important because what we have to look at, it's not only the technology that is available, but how people can also make it available and accessible for all. And we think that working with the technical community is actually one of the most efficient way to not only involve all the members of the community, but also to see how that technology can be customized to the local context. And we will work mainly with the NOGs, so network operator groups, and some of those that we are working actively with in the region. We have the BNOG, which is Burundi, CINOG, which is Cote d'Ivoire, Congo NOG, DR Congo as well, Senegal NOG, and we are also open to work with more NOGs that either want to start or are looking for partners to grow. The next one is the African Critical Infrastructure Development Program. That now we are looking more, we have talked about people, now we'll talk about infrastructure. And we believe fully in the power of collaboration. So we will work with a diverse group of stakeholders. This is a list of the stakeholders that we are working with, but it's not limited to that. So we'll work with IXPs, Internet Exchange Point. We'll work with government agencies. So we have agencies like digital development agencies that are government level, work with them and see how we can support them in their digital transformation journey. We also work with a regional association, and one of them being ATU, African Telecommunication Union. And we want to partner with all those entities and see how we can support into making those critical infrastructure available. And also for those who are not familiar with the terminology critical infrastructure, it is any infrastructure that if ever they are not available, they will critically impact internet. And what we want to do is to work together to create a strong and interconnected network. The next one is one of our flagship program, which is AFDSP. And this is the African DNS Support Program, or also called African Domain Secondary Program. And for this one, we have to remember that DNS is one of the main components, not only of internet, but also of AFRINIC services. And specifically, due to the fact that as AFRINIC, we are looking at such things as reverse DNS. So what we are doing here is taking into consideration our infrastructure. We'll make available to CCTLD and critical internet infrastructure operator in the region services at no cost for them to host their DNS. So we will just act as a secondary for them or slave so that they have a secondary at no cost. And here, this is something very important because look at the fact that a lot of registry in Africa, it's only now that they are supported by the government. A lot of them started as initiative from the technical community or one of the, let's say, internet founders in their country who fought to get the registry available, but most of them did not have all the infrastructure available. So this program is mainly targeted toward those CCTLD in Africa, offer them for at no cost, no extra cost, to have a secondary hosted at AFRINIC infrastructure. The map that you see there is most of the countries that we are covering, but we also you have to take into consideration that it's not only the first level, but also sometimes the second level. So for some countries, we may have 2 or 3 or more registry that we work with because of the second level. The next one is the root server copy, so AFRCP. And here again, we will target principally the IXPs, but it's not exclusive. And what we want to do is to make internet in the region more resilient. How? By providing copy of DNS root servers nodes in the region. And we'll do that by sourcing the hardware, but also facilitating administrative contact. And our goal is really to make sure that DNS is resilient in our service region. For those who are not really familiar with the DNS root, something that you need to take into consideration is whenever you type a URL such as www.afrinic.net, your DNS will first look for an available copy of the root server to now start looking up for which IP will correspond to that URL. So having a copy of root server in your country will make it much easier for DNS resolution. And the last one is our Anycast program. I like to keep it for the last, because here what we do is that we will deploy instances of our services outside of our infrastructure. And why? Because we want to make it available for all our community. And what is interesting when it comes to Anycast is that it's totally transparent for you. There is an automatic failover, so it will connect to the closest available instances of the service. And which service do we deploy when it comes to Anycast? We'll deploy what we call the NS2, which is our reverse DNS, and the CIP, which is mainly mostly the CCTLD zone that we are for which we offer secondary. And so what is actually interesting with that is whoever will host Anycast nodes for us will make not only the AFRINIC reverse zone available, but also all the African CCTLD that we support. And right now we have, I would say, close to 50 first and second level CCTLD. And we operate from multiple locations, and those are either location where we have physical hardware, but right now we are mostly targeting virtual. So we have Tunisia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Madagascar, we have South Africa, Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, and Mauritius. And it's also an opportunity for me to thank all our partners that work with us and that have been very faithful and helpful in deploying. And our target for 2024 is now to reach out to more IXPs, because one of the good things in Africa is that we have more and more IXPs that are becoming strong and reliable. So we want to work with them and see how we can deploy DNS nodes. Thank you for your attention, and back to you, Dr. Matagoro.
Thanks so much, Cedrick. Such wonderful achievements that AFRINIC is doing for the betterment of internet development in Africa. I really appreciate for the work that you have already achieved and the plan ahead of you. So maybe next presenter is Mr. Michuki Mwangi.
Thank you, Dr. Matogoro. So I share my screen. Thank you again, and it's a great opportunity for me to be here with you today. And I'm going to just talk about the internet development initiatives that the Internet Society has been working on in Africa. over the past few years. As mentioned earlier, the Internet Society works to promote an open, globally connected, secure and trustworthy internet. And because we believe in a world where the internet means opportunity. And we work collaboratively with our global community and partners to extend the internet so that it's able to reach those who need it the most, and at the same time work to protect its long-term well-being. We do so through various, I'll say, multi-pronged strategy, and I'll talk about the things that we've done or the approach that we take to extend connectivity and also protect its long-term well-being. So I'll start with capacity building. And basically what we've been able to identify is that there's a need to develop technical expertise so that we have a pool of subject matter experts that can be available to develop, maintain, and operate the internet infrastructure across the entire region. The way we develop these capacity building resources is that we have an online platform and also offline platform. For the online platform, we have moderated courses. Some are scheduled online courses. And also we have self-paced tutorials where individuals can come in and just take the course depending on their time and availability. Others are on-demand training, and we also do webinars similar to this one and collaborate with other partners as well in doing similar webinars. And at the same time, we have face-to-face courses where we actually go in places where there is a need and help do support the capacity building requirements in those places. Over the last few years, we've had these trainings going on, and it's been quite impactful in seeing the number of people we've been able, or learners that we've been able to reach over the past 3 years, for instance, since we transitioned into the online platforms through our training and e-learning system. And we've been able to reach over 30,000 learners. And during this period, we've seen a lot of growth, a lot of positive growth, where we've seen an increase in the number of women in terms of reducing the gender parity that was there previously. So increasingly, we are seeing more women coming and taking on the trainings. And also, we've seen growth in terms of the number of people who are coming to take the courses, especially from our region, which still stands up as the highest number of learners that we get on our platforms. We have a number of courses online, and I will certainly invite you to visit Learning at the Internet Society to see the trainings that we have on there. The other thing that we do is fostering sustainable peering infrastructure. This is where we support the development of peering infrastructure, internet exchange points, by supporting the creation of new internet exchange points and also supporting existing internet exchange points so that they can be able to have a bigger impact and support their growth requirements. In addition to that, we also support the development of the peering community. We believe that this is essential to growing peering and interconnection. Our partners at PCH have done a survey over the years that showed that more than 95% of all interconnections happen through handshakes. And those handshakes, a number of them tend to happen through peering events. And that's why we are very keen to support activities around peering forums, regional peering forums, and national peering forums. And I'll take this opportunity to do a shameless plug and invite you for the Africa Peering and Interconnection Forum, which will be happening this year in Kinshasa in August. We have a website for it, afpif.org. So please go there and register, take a look at the plans we have set, and also invite you, we have presentations, to come and present at that forum. So we're looking forward to be hosted by our, in Kinshasa by ISPA DRC, who will be our hosts. And we hope to have great conversations, but most importantly, promote interconnection and get more networks interconnecting across the region. As well, the event is organized in partnership with AFIX, the African IX Association. And so we are hopeful that as we continue this relationship, and supporting AFRIX. In the future, AFRIX will actually be taking leadership of organizing the AFTIF event, which will be a major success and milestone for the work that we've been doing in the region, to be able to transition some of that work to the community so that they can actually chart its way forward in terms of what they would like to do with respect to the future of peering and interconnection across the continent. And of course, we also continue to support the Regional Peering Forum. We have lined up the West Africa Peering Forum, the Central Africa Peering Forum, and also the Southern African, the SADC IXP Forum, which will be happening also this year. And also other national ones like the Nigeria Peering Forum. We don't end there. We engage in policy advocacy as well, where we foster policy and regulation to improve local and cross-border interconnection, and also promote peering so that we are able to achieve goals that enable an increase in the amount of content that's reachable locally. We have the Vision 50/50 by 2025, which we have a select number of countries that we like to see grow and have the 50% of the top destinations or websites or content that they reach being actually accessible within the local market. And I'll be remiss to say that we don't do all of this alone. We have a lot of partnerships that support what we do. We have collaborations and partnerships with folks like AFRIX, as I've mentioned, the Coalition for Digital Africa, which is with ICANN and others, Meta, SADC, and others that are too many to mention, but just mention those few. The next thing that we also do is connecting the unconnected. This is basically extending connectivity to those who are in rural, remote, and underserved areas. We have components of the work. This includes providing grants so that we're able to support the actual infrastructure deployments. We've supported about 11 deployments so far in Africa. And we also provide, on top of that, capacity building support. And this capacity building is designed so that the networks or the people who want to build community networks or other complementary access solutions don't need to directly come to the Internet Society to get the help. So we have a toolkit, a do-it-yourself toolkit, and a readiness assessment handbook that makes it possible for people to actually access the information, the knowledge, so that they can independently go out and build the internet infrastructure. In addition to that, we help with policy advocacy that helps to create an enabling environment for community networks to actually exist. And we are quite happy that a number of African countries like Kenya, like South Africa, Uganda, Zimbabwe, have actually put in enabling policies that make it possible for community networks to be created. They have a regulatory framework that guides, which is actually a lightweight framework, a lightweight regulatory framework, which is quite simple for community networks to be able to apply and get the licensing and then proceed to do the actual implementation. Finally, the other strategy that we use is measuring the impact and the resiliency of the internet, the availability of the internet, the health, and the evolution of the internet. So we do that through a platform called Pulse, which was launched in December 2020. And underneath this, what we're trying to do is curate data from various trusted sources to enable people to have a deeper insight about what's happening on the internet. So basically just the health, evolution, and availability of the internet. It makes sure that people have the information that they need to make the decisions that they need to make. So we are targeting policymakers, we are targeting researchers, journalists, and all other stakeholders that have an interest with respect to the internet. Some of the things that are available include the resiliency measurements, which are basically looking at the performance of the infrastructure, the availability of the infrastructure, the security of the infrastructure, and the market readiness of the infrastructure of the country that make it possible for there to be a resilient internet infrastructure in those countries. And then we rank that. And from that ranking, we're able to see where the countries stand and what actions countries can actually make to improve their internet resiliency. So I'll invite you to take a look at Pulse and see how that actually is how well your country is doing. And also, in addition to how well your country is doing, see where the gaps are and what you can do to improve it. The next thing that we do under on measuring the internet is also tracking global shutdowns. We know that this can be a challenge. We track the factors that lead to internet shutdowns like civil unrest, protests, armed conflicts, elections. And we've also seen situations where national or regional exams lead to shutdowns. Most of the shutdowns are ordered by regional or national governments. And so we track them because we want people to maintain the connectivity because it does have a negative impact. And we've been able to actually develop a tool called the net loss calculator, which is able to calculate the economic cost of internet shutdowns. So you're invited to go to the Pulse platform and just look at those resources that help you be a better advocate as to why governments should keep the internet on. Africa, unfortunately, we are among the countries, and if you look at the previous map, where we've had the most number of shutdowns, the continent with the most number of shutdowns. And elections, as I mentioned, is one of the times when shutdowns are likely to happen. We have 19 of them sort of scheduled for 2024, and we are keeping watch or tracking the developments just to be sure, to make sure that we do a proactive outreach and engagement to encourage the governments in those countries to not shut down the internet during those critical times of the elections, because that's a tool that people use for various other uses, and that disrupts the way of life. So some of the countries that we are quite we're tracking at the moment because they have a higher internet risk shutdown risk, Mozambique, South Sudan, Ghana, Chad, and Senegal. And we've also been able to calculate what that would mean if they were to shut down for a day, which is not small amounts of money. So again, here I would invite you to take a look at the tools and see how it can be of use to you, and also become an advocate for to those respective countries to avoid internet shutdowns. So with that, I know I'm well over time, so I'll stop there and happy to take your questions if you have any. Thank you very much, and back to you, Dr. Matogoro.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michuki. Such a wonderful conversation. And I can just have a quick pause for question and answers for Cedrick and for Michuki. And maybe I have seen some few questions in the chat, question and answer chat. Maybe before we respond to that, I have one question to Cedrick and another directed to Michuki. Maybe to Cedrick, Africa faces unique challenges in terms of internet connectivity. What are some of the prevailing challenges hindering internet development across the continent? And how is AFRINIC addressing those challenges? Maybe I can give 1 minute for Cedrick to respond, and then I can ask another question to Michuki. Welcome, Cedrick.
Thank you, Dr. Matogoro. It's true that our continent is facing a lot of challenges, and it's actually sometimes difficult to say how to address it because there's no magic wand. But something that we have observed as AFRINIC is that each and every country have a different context. And what we will do usually on our side is to work with them. So work with all the components, all the stakeholders, not only the government, but also the technical community, and see how we can work with them. Solution that can help for development, I would say one of them is raising awareness. most of the time, the challenge that we have is people not understanding how bad taking the wrong decision can impact the population. Michuki previously showed you some of the good work that ISOC is doing into monitoring the internet shutdown. And being myself in a country where we had to suffer that, currently in Senegal, we have seen how detrimental it was to the population, because government decided for specific reason to degrade the internet connection, but then lots of businesses had to close for many, many days because of that. So what we will do, one of the main things that I will say is, let's raise awareness, focus on building capacity. We also at AFRINIC offer capacity building. Sometimes people look only at our flagship program, which are the IPv6 and Internet Number Resources program, but also we can accompany when it comes to other ways of building capacity and raising awareness. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Matogoro.
Thank you so much, Cedrick. And I see, Michuki, in the chat, you have a few more questions, but I would like to ask one more question to you, Mr. Michuki, and I should also acknowledge that I'm one of that beneficiary and worked closely with Internet Society. But maybe, Mr. Michuki, you oversee regional development at Internet Society. How does ISOC collaborate with the local communities and organizations to foster internet development, especially in the underserved area? I hope when you respond this, it will also respond to another question which has been asked, how Internet Society, of course, in a community network could also benefit from the collaboration that you have mentioned clear on your presentation. Welcome, Mr. Michuki.
Thank you, Matogoro. One thing we are very clear on is that we cannot achieve the goal of connecting the unconnected or bringing affordable, resilient, and secure connectivity to all by ourselves. And so that is something that's very clear to us, and we work closely with strategic partners, organizations at regional level, national level, to be able to achieve the mutual goal of connecting the unconnected and bringing open, globally secure and trustworthy internet to all. And I can speak to this from a community networks perspective, where we work very closely with existing community networks. We support capacity building opportunities and needs that are there through the online trainings that we provide, but also at the same time in-person trainings as needed. We have trainers that we bring on to support the trainings, as well as we have what we call MESO partners. So the MESO partners are institutions that have the knowledge and experience in how to build community networks. And we make sure that they are supporting emerging communities or new communities that we've identified that need the support to be able to deploy the community networks in their respective areas. So we work through MESO partners, we work through partnerships, like we have MOUs with AFRINIC to do internet measurements, on IXP development. So in various ways, and not just at the technical space as well, but also on policy advocacy. There is a need to create an enabling environment across the continent so that we can see the emergence of community networks. And to do so, we have MOUs with the African Telecommunications Union. We have ongoing partnerships and collaboration with the African Union. We have an MOU with Smart Africa. We have an MOU with various policy organizations where we collaborate with them to create awareness, but also have dialogue and conversations around improving the existing policy and regulations so that we create an enabling environment for more networks to be established. So it's sort of like a high level, and I can go into the details of this, but I think in the interest of time, just like to touch about it on. I hope that responds to your questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Michuki, and I really appreciate the work that you are doing to connect the unconnected and support our African community. In the beginning, I also mentioned that we have Barack Otieno, who was not able to introduce himself, and I can give a chance, Barack Otieno, who is the chairman association of the community network in Kenya, who will introduce himself and take about to present and share us what he has prepared for us. Thank you. Welcome, Barack.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matogoro, for the opportunity, and I'll go straight to the presentation. My name is Barack Otieno. I will be speaking in my capacity as the chair of the Association of Community Networks in Kenya. My goal with this presentation is it's a call to action on the need for us to also consider alternative forms of access or to ensure that as many people are online. My motivation for doing this presentation was a report that I looked at for GSMA, that despite the fact that we are focusing on increasing coverage of connectivity infrastructure and telecommunication infrastructure, there is still a low amount, or rather a low number of people who are making meaningful use of this infrastructure. And as such, you find that if you look at the number of, I'll start with domain names because that's the field that I'm familiar with in Africa. We account for less than 1% of global registrations. If you look at the internet numbers, the ones that are shared online, Africa is credited for about 500 million users, but most of them are probably on social media platforms. And you can't say that there is any meaningful owned platform, for lack of a better word. So while we focused a lot of effort, as has been indicated by Michuki and Cedrick, in presentations that have actually touched on some of the issues that I'll talk about, there is need to increase meaningful usage of the internet, and community networks present this opportunity. Community networks are not new. I think the conversation of rural networks started in the early 2000s, championed by, among others, the International Center for Theoretical Physics. But more recently, the Internet Society has played a pivotal role in ensuring that community networks and other complementary ways of accessing the internet are actually available. And I think it would be amiss for me not to say that it's good to have these conversations, but for as long as we are not getting our people online meaningfully, then we are not headed in the right direction. The last couple of days, I have tried to take webinars from different corners of the country outside the city, and you are always running around looking for a good signal, despite the claims that we are making about the advancements that we are making, technologically. And this is not right. Most of us on this call are from a village somewhere, and I bet very few of us can actually take this call from the villages where we are in, which just speaks to the state of connectivity in our countries. Last week, I was having a conversation with a colleague from the industry who cited the fact that despite interventions from the Universal Access Fund or Universal Access Fund in most of our countries, you find that most service providers are still unwilling to get into the rural areas and deploy infrastructure because there is no business case. So I believe that it's a season and a time for community networks. They are not here to unsettle the industry the way it has been set, but they are here to complement the work that has been done. I have structured my presentation as per the bullets that I've shown there. A lot of the issues or sentiments that I wanted to make have been shared, and so I will just breeze through. But I'll talk about the journey of community networks in Kenya, the journey of community networks in Africa, some of the milestones and achievements, opportunities and challenges, recommendations to the regional internet registry. We have AFRINIC, and then recommendations to country code top-level domain registries and other top-level domains. I think the journey of community networks, I would put it in Kenya, and then I'll also combine with Africa. I believe peaked momentum with the first summit on community networks in Africa, organized by the Internet Society. Michuki had touched a bit of this on his presentation on 22nd November 2016. It followed a survey that had identified 37 community network initiatives in 12 African countries, out of which 25 initiatives were considered to be active. This is information that I have picked from the Internet Society, which is also available online. As we speak, the number of community networks has increased due to favorable policy frameworks and support to various tech players. We now have over the 25 active initiatives across Africa, whether you're speaking of Tanzania, whether you're speaking of Kenya, whether you're speaking of Zimbabwe, and the numbers are increasing. And my call is, if you're on this call and you have not started a community network initiative, I think the opportunity exists for you to be a champion in your country. In the meeting, in this summit that was hosted in 2016, among the first initiatives to present were Mesh Bukavu, Bosco Uganda, Murambida Works from Zimbabwe, Soweto Wireless User Group, Pamojanet, Tunapandanet from Kenya, which was a pioneer community network, the Fanswam Foundation from Nigeria, and Connecting Enhana in Namibia. Since then, the Internet Society went ahead and held a number of summits. The second summit was held alongside the Africa Internet Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. And I believe there was a practice session that exposed participants to deploying infrastructure in community networks, which was done at Tunapandanet. Going forward or going ahead, other players such as the Association of Progressive Communications, to name a few, have come on board to support the community networks conversation. And some of the ways in which they have done this is through national schools of community networks. In the previous iteration, which ended last year, we had, among others, the Kenya School of Community Networks that was organized by Tunapandanet with the support of APC. We had similar schools organized in South Africa and also in Nigeria. Most recently, led by the Internet Society Kenya chapter, we had the first national summit of community networks in Kenya that brought together stakeholders to just understand what do we mean when we are talking about community networks, because they mean different things to different people. How can government, how can private sector, how can civil society, how can academia contribute to community networks? And most recently, the Kenya ICT Action Network actually held a workshop to check how the community networks in Kenya are actually supporting differently abled people. So you realize the conversation is all about reaching the unserved and the underserved. Some of the activities or workshops that have been done, as I mentioned, at the second summit that was held alongside the Africa Internet Summit, the third summit in Eastern Cape, hosted by Zenzeleni, which is also one of the community networks that has really built the body of knowledge in this space. Fourth summit in Dodoma, Tanzania, hosted by Kondoa Community Network, which is led by Dr. Matogoro, our moderator. A lot of work has been done in Tanzania in development of cooperatives that are leading community networks. In Kenya, when we talk about cooperatives, we think about saving money. In Tanzania, when they talk about cooperatives, they're talking about connectivity. And in the summit that was hosted in Kenya, we actually had Tarime Community Network, which is an area close to the Kenyan border, also coming to participate so that we share knowledge. Because of COVID, some of these activities were held as virtual events in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. But it's my hope that beyond localized initiatives championed by chapters, championed by community network actors, we are also going to have major stakeholders contribute towards the community networks movement. I'm sharing a map from Association of Progressive Communication, which shows some of the community network initiatives across Africa. But I must say that the landscape has changed. We need to see more population on this map, and I believe it's an opportunity for Africa to take a lead. We still have many parts of our continent that are not meaningfully connected, which hinders our participation as meaningful stakeholders in internet conversations globally. Some of the milestones and achievements, and Michuki had touched on some of these. In Kenya, we managed to get the Community Network Service Provider license in 2021 through an initiative championed by the Association of Progressive Communications through the local network initiative that was hosted by the Kenya ICT Action Network with the support of FCDO. We've also had successes in Uganda. We've had successes in Zimbabwe. We've had successes in Lesotho. I heard about this most recently. There is a lot of work going on in Tanzania, and I'm sure you can add your country to the list. Efforts are underway to ensure that community networks are recognized through relevant policy frameworks in South Africa. I know there are many colleagues on the call from South Africa whom we are sharing knowledge. What we can do is look at countries that have done it and just share some of the best practices. Again, number of community networks is growing across the continent, and there is increasing awareness among policymakers and infrastructure players, resulting in more last mile access. Let me just, as I head towards the tail end of my conclusion, let me just touch on some of the opportunities that community networks are likely to present to the African internet community. One, we are seeing increasing support from government, regulatory agencies, resulting in allocation of more resources and prioritization of last mile connectivity. In many of our African countries, the Universal Service Fund, which is an agreed fund globally, is not being used optimally because sometimes we don't know what to do with it. So it is at the mercy of politicians, and I think we can change the narrative by taking control of issues of last mile access. Again, increasing awareness on the digital value chain, thanks to the pandemic that was brought about by COVID, is also creating a big opportunity for community networks. There's increasing digital literacy owing to an increase in the number of actors involved in the digital ecosystem, from civil society to academia. In Kenya, we now have over 5,000 government services online. It doesn't matter whether you are literate or illiterate. If you want a government service, you need to go online. And we all know that government is the largest catalyst for business and many other activities. And therefore, we have to make sure that our community members are connected. There's also enactment of futuristic policies that support digitization and digitalization. We have a lot of work around artificial intelligence. We have a lot of work around common markets. We have a lot of work around digital public infrastructure and data protection. Unfortunately, most of these are driven by what's happening in the global north, because most of the African countries are their business partners. But I think we need to change the narrative so that we are the ones who are driving these conversations on account of the benefits that our citizens are actually getting. Last but not least, localization of internet traffic and an increase in data centers is also creating a case for more local content and more localized community network. In fact, I dare say, a colleague was sharing with me that in the near future, it might cost $0 to buy internet. What people will be paying is actually the value that service providers are providing for them. And this is content. So in Tanzania, where the common language is Kiswahili, I can't go there to sell content that is in English. Okay, content that is in Hindi, for lack of a better word. Let me use an extreme perspective. So we need to consider such issues. Some of the challenges that community networks face are not new to infrastructure providers. Cost of equipment for infrastructure deployment And organizations like the Internet Society, the Association of Progressive Communications have been at the forefront of supporting some of these infrastructure costs or offloading. But beyond the support, the community networks are expected to actually scale or grow on their own. The other issue is cost of operating. Community networks are basically telecommunication organizations, even though they receive favorable terms, and therefore they require competent personnel and skills to operate. And you cannot keep someone as a volunteer for more than 3 months. After that, they will remind you that they have families to feed and you have to provide for them. So cost of operating remains a key consideration. Inadequate power. Power is a major problem. I recently participated in a conversation and I heard that we cannot even host tier 4 data centers simply because of lack of power. The already existing data centers, when we have national blackouts or challenges of those kind really suffer, and some of the big tech are shying away from having local hosting. Cost of bandwidth, I think the moment our governments realize the benefit of the internet and more people going online, they also saw it as an opportunity to tax us more. And I think this is a conversation that we need to have with our government. Some of us will end up as members of parliament. Let's take these conversations in those environments. Inappropriate network designs. In as much as we are talking about alternative forms of access, it's very important to recognize the fact that the cost, one of the biggest factors of cost of internet is transit charges. So if we are able to keep this traffic within our communities or locally, then we should do it. And I think for internet exchange points, I think the call is spread yourselves out to try and help with this initiative of keeping local traffic as local as possible. Also encouraging service providers, whether for profit or not for profit, to collaborate and to identify areas of synergy. Again, the issue of weak communities of practice, Cedrick talked about network operator groups. We need more of this. We need to localize or ruralize, if there's anything like that. We also need national DNS fora that will expose our citizens to the benefits of the internet value chain. It must not be in English. It can be done in local languages. It can be done in whatever languages, but we must speak a language that our people can be able to identify with. Forgive me for speaking like a politician. Recommendations to regional internet registries, specifically AFRINIC. We need a policy framework that allows community networks to access resources. I think there's the benefit in having those resources. I know a number have tried to access resources from AFRINIC, and sometimes the cost is out of reach. So if this is something that can be considered, the end goal is to make sure that we connect as many people as possible. The other issue is training to community network operators to ensure the resources are optimally used. A lot is being done by the Internet Society, and there are courses that are coming up on the 8th of April. Allow me to also say that because I'm one of the instructors. Please sign up, and when you sign up, stay until the end. Don't drop off. Focus on value-based training, support to communities of practice that support interdependence and reuse of resources. We need to cooperate and collaborate more, not fight over resources, yet we are operating in the same communities. Some of the recommendations to CCTLDs and other TLDs is to onboard community networks as registrars, to foster collaboration with community networks that will build local internet value chains, collaboration with community networks to train end users, and conducting DNS capacity building programs in collaboration with community networks to increase the number of registered domain names at the last mile. That brings me to the end of my presentation, and back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Barak. Such fascinating conversation. And I should acknowledge the founder of the Tanzania Community Network Alliance, which is currently supporting 4 community networks in Tanzania, the one in Kondoa, another in Kasulu, Kigoma, and the third one is in Nyasa, Ruvuma, and the fourth one is in Tarime. And we are pushing hard to make sure that we have more and more community network cooperatives to connect the unconnected populations. Next to the podium is our user friend, Benson, who will be sharing to us what they're doing and how they are working to address the internet development in Tanzania. Welcome, Benson.
Thank you very much. Give me a second to share.
I should also appreciate the active participation of the participants. It's almost 1 hour and the number is still constant, and more people are joining to the conversation. So this shows that people are active and following up. You can just send the feedback in the chat, and then we can proceed in engaging the conversation. Welcome, Benson. As Benson is connecting, we can. I should also encourage panelists to take a few questions in the chat, QA chat, so that you can just respond. I have seen Michuki responding to some of these questions. I also encourage more questions to be sent to us during from the QA chat, and also encourage panelists to respond to these questions as we are waiting to hear from Benson. Welcome, Benson. I see your screen. You can make it in a slide.
Can you see my slides? Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Make it
so I think the slides will be made available. Is it full screen or?
Can you make it in a full screen? Not yet.
So let me try again.
While Benson is connecting, maybe I have one question to you, Barak, which I think is very important to what you have shared. How do you foster community engagement and ownership in the internet development project within community network, especially considering the reliance on volunteer efforts? And then you can also share a successful example of an conventional solution or an alternative technologies that can address some of these issues that we have pointed out. I have seen you also pointed out the issue of maybe payment fundings on the community network and their resilience, but also you can also share us in terms of internet access in remote or challenging areas. What is your experience? Maybe you can take one or more minutes and then we give Benson a chance to proceed.
Thank you very much, Matogoro. I think one of the best practices is just to talk about our problems as we are doing. If you look in the past, a lot of the investment in internet and telecommunications within the global south or sub-Saharan Africa, whichever way you want to call it, there's very little investment from locals. But the tide is changing, because we are understanding the benefit and we are seeing the narrative. And this is happening because whenever we have opportunities such as this, we are able to talk about them. Initially, when this conversation started, community networks were viewed as competitors to the mainstream operators. But over time, it has been established that community networks are not competitors, but they actually complement the mainstream operators. Actually, you need the mainstream operators to be able to provide the connectivity at the last mile. And we are able to save the mainstream operators the cost of setting up shop in the community and running up in the community day and night so that they can focus on routing and other core functions of making sure that they bring us the capacity from subsea cables to the community level. I think the other issue is we have had a lot of affirmative action from our governments supporting different initiatives, such as water, to say the least. And I think most of our governments are now aware of the increasing benefit of the internet or basically information and communications technology. And investing in infrastructure is a deep pit. No single organization can be able to do it on its own. So we need a multiplicity of investments, whether from government, whether from development organizations, to make sure that we have suitable infrastructure. Beyond deployment, the infrastructure also has to be protected, and the infrastructure also needs to be used. So I would say that these are some of the issues that I consider to be important. I think for community networks, especially those that are active, you'll realize that the moment you connect the community and you take money from them, then you have a legal and moral obligation to provide a service, just like any other international organization that will be providing a service. So we need to think through. And as Michuki had mentioned, there's a course known as Community Network Readiness Assessment. There's a tool that has been developed in that particular course that can enable you to develop a business plan, that can enable you to come up with a cost-benefit analysis scenario that will tell you whether you are ready or not to deploy a community network. It will also teach you how to conduct stakeholder engagement to make sure that you have the support of the community, the government, and all the key actors for optimum success of your community network. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I appreciate for your feedback. And Benson Mwite, kindly proceed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the feedback. I hope slides are visible now. So I'll talk a little bit about the IETF, which stands for the Internet Engineering Task Force. And this kind of gives a brief outline of the presentation. So I'll give you a quick introduction, some history, where the IETF meets. So while internet allows you to do a lot of things remotely, face-to-face interaction is actually also quite helpful. Some of the impact it has had and how you can participate. So unlike a lot of the other organizations, a lot of the work that the IETF does can be done remotely. And it would be one way that one can participate in how the internet is developed. So as I said, it's called the Internet Engineering Task Force. And the main thing it does is it creates an environment where people can participate in development of standards. Everything is done with email. Well, it's a primary mechanism for communication. And the standards are available for you also openly to read. They have standards for most of the protocols that are used on the internet. And in particular, if you're interested in developing new standards, it's a good place to get involved. The website is there. I'll go to that towards the end. So first meeting was held in 1986, and it had evolved out of a USA-funded research project, which was known as AFRINIC. So there was kind of attempts at networking computers before, and to be able to do this successfully, you kind of have to agree on how you're going to communicate. And this kind of grew out of that and has grown further. During the 1990s, there was actually a similar kind of technology. It was called Minitel. And this was developed mostly in France and had spread to other parts of Europe. It initially was deployed over television sets and allowed kind of sending of things like newspaper articles, bulletin boards, chat services. So kind of a pre-runner of the internet as you know it today, but using significantly lower number of bits to communicate. Well, the IETF kind of started in the USA. At present, there's a lot of active participation from Europe and Asia. And this is not just from people selling hardware, but also from people operating services. So many of the large corporations who help run internet services or build on top of the internet are interested in the standards that are used and participate in this. So if you take a look at the meeting locations, kind of what you see here is a plot of the world. and each dot kind of indicates a previous meeting location. A lot of them are clustered in USA. It started there, so that's perhaps not unsurprising. This far one here is Hawaii. There's a current meeting this week, which is in Brisbane. I haven't quite added that yet, but that would appear here. And has had a number of meetings in Japan, Asia, nothing in Africa yet, and in Europe. So there's kind of large parts of the world where I guess infrastructure operators have not gone to see what conditions are available. The way the ITF operates, it produces what they call requests for comments. So the standards are not things which you're forced to abide by, because it's something that's done globally. Even if you look at, say, for example, something like the United Nations, they issue also recommendations, and then people kind of voluntarily choose to abide by these, because it's very hard to enforce these legally. So if we look at the number of RFCs since 2019, so this is when they first started adding, well, having an option to add the country in which you're based when you submit RFC, which is kind of an internet protocol proposal. We see that most of them come from the USA, but there's significant activity also from Canada, India, China, Japan, not quite as many. You see Spain, United Kingdom, Italy. In terms of Africa, we have here, there's one from Morocco, and there's also Mauritius. I think the line here I've put incorrectly, as I'd seen from one of the earlier slides, Mauritius is actually over here. That's just enlarged just because otherwise it will not show up on this map. So we've had quite a number of RFCs from Mauritius. The rest of Africa, we're not really involved in designing the protocols that we want to use for the internet. And if we want to be sure that the internet works well for local conditions, we should participate more and be seen to participate more. There's been quite a number from South America, and they've had like one meeting there. But it would be good to be active in this area. So if you look at attendance, while it's free to participate online, it does actually cost quite some money to go places. And some people are actually quite vocal about that. So ITF 116, which was in Yokohama, you can see that it had a lot of people from the US who had to fly there and attend that meeting in person. But also the number of local attendance from Japan was actually very high, which is quite good. And when you do have kind of activities related to internet development, it's helpful to participate when you have a chance to do so and influence that. It tends to be much easier than many other venues. People are friendly and generally happy to talk about technology. If we look at the next one, San Francisco, again, attendance from the US is very high. This time, not quite so many from Japan, but still a reasonable number of people. So when things are local, more people can go. This is always a good thing. We see that some attendance from South Africa and also from Kenya. I think I made a slight mistake here in doing the plot. This should be from New Zealand, which is here. And next one was a Prague. So ITF tries to follow a policy where they kind of rotate their meetings. They hold 3 per year. So they try to rotate them at the moment between basically North America, Europe, and then Asia. There's kind of some efforts to modify these policies. So this one, again, there's a person from Kenya, not so much from South Africa. Australia, New Zealand, again, you see a fairly large number of people from China. So expect many of you will have routers, things which also come from China. So the standards for these kind of communication devices are typically developed here. And I guess the current one, there's dot here, which is Western Samoa. So you can see that there's people who come from fairly remote places and attend these meetings and participate in the development. So you don't necessarily have to be in like Silicon Valley to be able to participate in the development of the internet. Okay, so typical things that have been developed here, HTTPS. So whenever you go to a website and you see that it's secured, there's a protocol that determines how your information is going to be transmitted to your web browser. BGP, if you're a network operator and you have internet traffic that's moving, this is what is used. IPv6, currently there's efforts to migrate from IPv4. Typically you buy a domain name and then you associate that to a DNS address. At the moment, many people are using IPv4 and there's interest in moving to IPv6, which has some security benefits and also has much larger address space. So the IPv4 space is being exhausted. And OpenPGP. So if you want to do signing of email or encrypting of email, these RFCs kind of describe how that is done. And you can actually go and look them up and check that they're there. And this is very helpful for interoperability. If you're building software systems, many times you want to interoperate with people elsewhere. So you can run some of the things internally, but typically, for example, you have, say, an Android device and it has a web browser. You want to be sure that an Android device can communicate with your server. And so you need to check that the protocols that are used are kind of agreed upon and make sense for you. And so this is why it's important to participate in these kinds of things. So it does take time. So especially those of you associated with educational institutions, there's lots of opportunity to participate online, even for students. And as universities are kind of some of the first places to come online, this is kind of a good way to show the power of the internet. So you sign up for a mailing list. For many of the meetings, you can also participate remotely. So that's what I have done so far. And there's an option to participate without pay. But if you can, then it's helpful to support by paying. And there are a number of also other things such as research groups. So I showed RFCs, which are kind of internet standards, which is kind of a measurable output. But for example, this global access to the internet for all, there's a lot of interesting discussions about people who are measuring internet resilience, using Internet of Things to improve their local communities. So measuring things like pollution, water quality. So these are all kind of interesting places to learn and about new technologies and build upon them. So the code associated with the figures is available in the repository, so that should be available to you later. And I'll just share the website for the moment, so you can see that. So it's still going on. There's one more day left. If you're interested in seeing that, you can actually just sign up and watch a few things tomorrow. I guess as it's in Australia, the time is quite late. But I'll maybe give you a brief overview. So you can actually even just go and see, for example, the agenda. And I guess at the moment I'm logged in. So it takes a few minutes. Sorry, I'm on a mobile connection. But you can, for example, make a text-only version. So there are, for example, people in sparsely populated areas who do not have high connectivity. I should have set this up. Okay.
Benson, we can't hear you very well. Maybe you check your mic or connectivity. Benson, your voice is not clear.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, some are good.
Okay.
Are you done?
So I've just put a link to the ITF website in the chat, and you can take a look at that in your own time. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Benson. I think you presented a very important discussion, and it took me to few more questions to you, and maybe to understand what can we do to improve the situation. Maybe Benson Mwite, to your knowledge, I have seen you presented the participation of various regions to ITF activities. And I have noted that Africa has very low participation. What are the primary challenges that have contributed to the low participation of African stakeholder in the ITF activities? And how can these challenges be addressed or overcome?
Okay, so thank you for your question. So I think first, a lot of people are not online all the time, and kind of developing standards is not going to be the primary purpose of people who are maybe firstly interested just in business or using the internet for commerce or for using other platforms that people have developed. But once you, say, start developing infrastructure yourself, so for example, Liquid Telecom, which is deploying a lot of fiber, has actively participated in ITF, primarily because I think they got to the point where they saw challenges in some of the protocols that are being used. In Kenya, for example, we have M-Pesa, which is primarily built on mobile phones. But if you look in, say, China, they use Alipay, a lot of them. And they need to be sure that their internet infrastructure, which this is running over, that works reasonably well for that kind of service. So I think we need to see maybe some of the bigger players who are, I guess the talk mentioned about setting up data centers. In some sense, data centers like a factory, in the sense that you go out and you buy servers and you set them up. It's a little bit more well understood. But if you start to have several different kind of data centers and you need to interconnect them, then you need to start worrying more about the underlying infrastructure. If you have people wanting to do payments, for example, as mentioned that there's a lot of government services offered over the internet, then you need to worry about services. How are you going to identify people? Are the protocols you're using secure for that? So this is an area where we need maybe some of the people, either in universities, funded by the government, doing research on these kinds of things, taking active participation. I think Nigeria, for example, many people get recognized for academic publications. They would not get at this point recognized for helping improve internet standards. But if you are specializing in an area and you're doing research in an area, you actually want that research also to end up in a practical situation. And so encouraging even master's students to participate because they can do so remotely would be a good thing. They would get feedback from an international audience, they would get recognition, they would get to interact with people at global companies. And because also their materials are openly available, if you have an internet connection, you can download them and read them. Much academic research is behind paywalls, so this is harder to do. So I think having people also be willing to participate, either as companies, or for example, if you're developing community networks, just doing measurements and reporting your measurements through these kind of fora allows you to get access to people who are developing new protocols and deploy them ahead of time, test them out on a small scale, see if it's something that's useful for you. So there are people, for example, very interested in doing audio coding. This is one thing I guess COVID has pushed. And they realize that not everybody's going to be on a high bandwidth connection and they still need to interoperate. So these are some areas where it's possible to increase participation, increase your knowledge level. The payoff is usually not immediate, but it's something that's needed for sustainable use of the internet. So I hope that answered your question, Dr. Jabera.
Thank you so much. I've also put a chart in in the chat where I said it's just like a call to action for academia in the conversation. Kindly encourage your graduate students to actively participate to ITF activities and could find the research gaps aligned within ITF activities. And these will push more active participation from our region. I think that could also be a better way to increase the African participation. I hope we are near to the end of the conversation, and I give 1 more minute to each of the panelists to just summarize what you have presented, and possibly if you have any call to action from this conversation. I start with Cedrick.
Thank you, Dr. Matagoro, and thank you to all my fellow panelists. I was really honored to be part of such a great panel. And I will say that we at AFRINIC, we have a lot of internet development initiatives. And one thing that you have to remember and to take into consideration is that we cannot do that all by ourselves. Cooperation and collaboration is something very important. And that's the reason why you will see that AFRINIC will partner with organizations such as Internet Society, AFTLD, PCH. For instance, Michuki is part of the people that we are working a lot with in initiatives such as IXPs. We don't want to compete, we want to work together because our goal and our objective is the same, which is developing internet on the continent. So we want to encourage anybody who wants to reach out to us. You can either send an email to contact@afrinic.net or engagement@afrinic.net, and we will be more than happy to collaborate with you, to support you. And don't hesitate to reach out to us, even if you have already reached out to other organizations. Remember, we are all working together, so don't look at us as competitors. We are all part of the great internet ecosystem. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Matagoro.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michuki.
Well, I had to come after Cedrick, and sounds like he's covered everything.
Yeah.
But essentially, what I would encourage is you to understand that a lot of the work that happens over the internet is largely because of community. And I think we've talked about community networks, we've talked about network operator groups, we've talked about the IETF. All these are communities of practice where there's a particular interest. You come together, volunteer your time, your resources towards an issue that is of interest to you, and then pursue that through those communities. The ISOC chapters, I've seen questions about ISOC chapters. Those are also communities. So dedicate some time, some of your time towards a particular area of interest. Contribute your time, your resources, read about it, research about it, bring contributions, try things. That's the only way you'll be able to move something forward. So we can talk a lot about things, but it's a question of what are you going to go and do about it? So being able to commit, sacrifice your time and towards a particular issue that is, either a gap you've identified, whether it's bringing more people connectivity to those who are underserved, whether it's a policy advocacy issue that needs time and research and engagement with various stakeholders, whether it's an issue of the IETF where we're talking about protocol development, that also needs time and commitment. So of all the issues we've talked about today, it's a question of you taking the initiative to support that. AFRINIC, they have the community mailing list where there are certain issues that are also discussed. All these issues really do require active engagement, collaboration, and that's the only way we can make things move forward. So my call to action to you is, of the things we've covered today, what touches you the most? Where do you feel you could be able to bring the most contribution? Connect with those individuals, ask for information, guidance, and put your time and resources behind it. And surely at the end of it, you will see some impact.
Thank you so much, Michuki. Benson, in maybe 30 seconds, because time is not in our side.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. I guess it was very helpful learning about the infrastructure. I hope to have, I guess I would suggest that for those people who are developing community networks, IETF is a good place to learn about things. There's especially active groups on Internet of Things. And I think a lot of the security for this is being spearheaded by AFRINIC. So all those 6 RFCs, which came from Mauritius, they're actually all associated to one person. So I can try and maybe share a link to the working group that he's leading. As that might be relevant. But then many others, as people are aware of, the internet is a big thing and there's lots of technologies. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Benson Barak. In 20 seconds, time is not on our end.
Thank you, Matogoro. My clarion call is for all of us to see how we can go beyond focusing solely on infrastructure to increasing meaningful usage of the internet in our communities. Thank you again for listening. Thank you, Matogoro, for listening to us, for leading us, and to my fellow panelists for the insightful presentations. Bye-bye.
I should take one comment from Howie Rapudo, who said, thanks, Michuki, Internet Society has been instrumental for the growth of community network in Kenya, support toward ISOC Kenya, and membership with Community Network are now 25 bucks. So yesterday, the Ngrunit community, Masabi community, 40 meters from Lake Turkana, launched their community network with 137 Mbps. Wow, such achievement. Congratulations, guys from Kenya, and for the wonderful work we are doing out there. Maybe as we are winding up, I should also welcome you to our next webinar, which is titled African Internet Exchange Point Stories, IXP, which will be in French. This webinar will take place on 4th April 2024 at 10 a.m. UTC. This webinar will explore the history, challenges, and opportunities facing African Internet Exchange Point, as well as their role in enabling digital transformation across the continent. It is a very webinar. We strive to improve your experience. At the end of this webinar, a survey will pop up on your screen. Then you can just give us your feedback. The only thing we are going to ask is for you to fill in the survey to help us make the experience in AFRINIC Webinar even better. It would also be nice to get a rating from you. Please spare a minute or two to complete the survey. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate for their active engagement, and I hope to meet you again in the next conversation.